And I think we should make a start. Welcome to the first Brisbane Tableau use group, a virtual one. Last time we met, I think was in February. Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I think there was 10 of us in a room at QT just after a big storm, a typical Brisbane storm, and it's nice awesome to see so many people have registered. I think we had 80 people have registered. Online makes it, I guess, a bit easier.
True.
So welcome everyone. Just out of curiosity, is everyone from Brisbane, or we've got some interstate or even overseas people? Maybe if you're not from Brisbane, just put a little flag or something in the chat or your thumb up. I'm just interested to see if there's only Brisbane people or interstate or even overseas people.
We've got Jeff from NZ, Geoff from Sydney, Lydia from Melbourne.
Tell us where you're from. Any
awesome.
New Zealanders? Any overseas people? Anyway, welcome. So
I think Jeff's from Auckland.
Right. And also listed the LinkedIn group for Tableau Brisbane user group. So welcome. We've got an amazing program today. So moving on, I just want to start with the acknowledgement to country in Australia. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we meet today and pay my respect to elders, past, present, and emerging. So I think that's important that we acknowledge the elders. And I also want to extend the respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nation people here today in the Zoom session. So you got our respect. We've got an amazing agenda. Obviously, I'm Frederic, and then we'll have Adam from Kidada is going to talk a little bit, a couple of minutes. We're going to start with Darragh, one of our amazing volunteers for Viz For Social Good, and he's going to talk to us about reflection on climate change. Then Mark Jeffrey from Griffith University, talking about Griffith's Tableau journey. And then finish off with Ronak from the QT bands and reflecting on the datathon that they just had a couple of weeks ago. So it's amazing. Good program, I think. We're also going to do a Q&A. So we've got 15 minutes for each of the presentations. So if you have questions, put them in the chats, and maybe Adam and Karen can help me try to, if I don't see the question in Zoom, maybe you can just take the microphone and jump in for the questions. I also want to plug one of the things that's very dear to my heart, which is Viz For Social Good. Recently joined the board, so we're basically a charity and we help other charities make sense with their data. So we organize hackathon, datathons, and we've got an amazing program this month called Bridge to Prosperity. So they are a charity that basically bridges in Rwanda in the world, and the bridges are actually connecting communities. So I think that's an amazing program. So if you got a smartphone and you're interested to join the project, basically we give you the data and then you give your time and visualize with Tableau, Power BI, or whatever tool you want. And then early October, we do a live pitch where volunteers can present their insights. And Darragh will be talking about that process with one of the previous projects he was working on last month. And also plugging the Tableau conference. Just in case you don't know, it's virtual this year, it's free. Log in. Asia Pacific will be 7th to the 9th of October. I think it should be amazing, and should be quite good to don't have to travel very far, just attend the conference in your lounge. Adam, do you want to chat about those things for a couple of minutes?
Yes, sure. This is going to be very, very quick. I'm not going to go through those dates, but that's just a quick highlight about the upcoming training in the AEST time zone. So Tableau has basically stopped. I mean, pretty much most people have stopped running training in person. However, a virtual training has kept going, and they're actually training that have a live trainer. So it's not as great as having someone in person, but it's still pretty good. So there's some upcoming trainings that you can see on the screen. Visual analytics is one that we were just talking about before, Gary. Pretty close to our heart. So teaching visual best practices. So that's something I'd encourage everyone to do. And desktop training is pretty traditional, as you know. Server administration is one that also I encourage everyone who's working with Tableau server within an organization of a certain size to really attend to learn best practices. I just wanted to, more than this, I just wanted to thank everyone for gathering, I guess, virtually today, and particularly Frederic, who has put his hand up to get this user group going. Traditionally, as you know, the Brisbane Tableau user group has been run in our premises or within our office, and Kida has been sponsoring beers and pizzas, but it seems like since COVID, we haven't really found a way to do it. So I'm really, really glad, and I couldn't really find the time to actually get something going virtually. So yeah, very, very pleased to have Frederic sort of stepping in and helping run that. So thanks very much, mate. That's really, really great.
And you're saving on the pizza.
Yep, round of applause. And of course, you're more than welcome to grab a free beer in your own fridge. It's on me. And also very, very keen to see what Ronak and Chintan are going to present. I was very pleased to run that Tableau workshop back at QUT because Frederic was actually busy. So see, things are, what goes around comes around. So I was really, really pleased to be invited by Ronak and the rest of the team at QUT Bands to run this Tableau event. So I'm really excited to have them present today at this Tableau user group. It's pretty much it for me. And hopefully the next one we can gather physically and have a proper beer and pizza.
Yeah, so I think we'll probably try to get another one in a couple of months' time. So I guess we'll just see what happens with COVID and the physical distancing and that kind of stuff.
Fingers
so
crossed.
Let's start with Darragh. I think we're on time. So Darragh, you got the floor.
There you go.
15, 20 minutes. And then, as I said, we do Q&As just after your preso. So
No
if people have questions, put them in the chat and I'll let you run the show.
Cool, no worries. I'm just going to present some the old PowerPoint slides first before jumping into the visualization I'm going to talk about today. So hopefully this works. So on my dual screen, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, yes.
Sweet.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Nice color.
Nice color. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I am Darragh Murray. Yeah, many thanks to Frederic for inviting me along, and also the great guys and girls at Key Data, Adam, Kyle, and everyone else for helping to coordinate this. They have a long history of supporting this meetup, and it's generally just a great bunch of people. So, yeah, here to yeah, thanks for organising it. Yeah, if you don't know me, as I said, I'm Darragh. I've got qualification. I've been using Tableau for about 3 to 4 years now. Though it's not really the main thrust of my job. I work in education as a strategic data analyst. And where I can, I try to use Tableau as my visualization tool of choice. But as I was complaining about before the session, I'm kind of more and more forced towards Power BI nowadays, and that's very frustrating for me. But anyway, I have qualifications in actually international politics, information systems, and analytics. So it's a bit of a strange mix of strange backgrounds. But obviously I have a keen interest in data visualization and also using it to explore the humanities and social science, and also looking at key social issues, particularly around aspects of inequality in the world. So I've got about 15 minutes, I'm going to say, today to talk to you about a recent project I did for the Viz For Social Good endeavor. And I want to spend maybe about 8 to 10 minutes talking about how the visualization came to be, and then kind of run you through the visualization at the end. So hopefully that works for me. I timed myself earlier and it was kind of 15 minutes on the dot. So we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
Anyway, so yeah, Viz For Social Good. So Frederic's kind of already kind of explained this a bit, but just to kind of recap, is essentially it's a worldwide social enterprise that kind of connects data enthusiasts and data visualization professionals with very mission-driven organizations such as NGOs or charities, for example. They're good examples, and they run projects every month looking at socially important issues that affect humankind. So the project usually, as Frederic was saying, gives it access to a kind of key data set to work upon. and essentially, it's a great win-win, both for the people participating, but also for the NGO or charity or organization that is receiving the benefit, because data visualization practitioners like myself, we can work on interesting projects that we might not be able to do on our day-to-day, and also kind of develop our skills further, try new stuff, things. But also the NGO or the charity receives the benefit of the data visualization expertise that really at little to no cost, which is great. It's a great win-win, great incentives lining up there to achieve a good outcome. And the project that I participated in, which is my first time in Viz For Social Good, was with an organization called Kieran Education. They're an NGO based out of Germany who kind of provide free, high quality education resources to mostly disadvantaged groups such as migrants and in particular refugees. So, and they want to kind of teach people these new skills, allow them access to education, which they may not otherwise get. So essentially this Viz For Social Good project was linking up with Kieran, and what they were doing, the ask of the project, so to speak, was they wanted, the headline was visualizing data to tell new migration stories. And the background of this was on about June 20 this year, Kieran, along with an organization called Amplify Now, were hosting a virtual refugee conference. And they invited Viz For Social Good to come along and present on the topic of migration. And of course, the Viz For Social Good team got the community involved to build some visualizations for the sessions, but and there's a handful of entries were selected to present at the conference itself. There was a high level of participation with I don't know the exact number, there's well over 30 entries, possibly up to about 50. But of those entries, 5 were selected to present at the conference, and spoiler alert, I was fortunate enough to be selected. So that was really a good thing for me personally, to be able to talk about my visualization. Now, I'll give a quick overview of the data that I used. I'm not going to actually show you the data sets. That might be getting a bit too intense for a Zoom call. But essentially, we were kind of given a range of data sets. Like here's one on internally displaced persons. It's provided by a UN service. I can't remember the exact name off the top of my head. But we also had the permission to kind of seek out our own information to kind of blend it together to create a story, so to speak. So when I kind of looked at, here's a screenshot of one of the data sets. And when I kind of looked at what was in the data, essentially the data was kind of showing information about refugees, also internally displaced people, and kind of that was also showing things like geographic information and time series data. I'm not going to explain all of these variables now, but essentially one of them, as I mentioned, was refugees. As we know, refugees are people who are forced to flee across their national borders, typically in order to escape the consequences of, say, war, natural disaster, or persecution. As I mentioned there's a few variables there: country, year, and a number of refugees and people displaced. However, in the data itself, it talks about a different category of migrant or forced migrant called the internally displaced persons. And I'm not sure if people realize there is a difference between a refugee and an IDP. IDPs are very similar categorized very similar to refugees, but they're typically, distinguished by the fact that they do not cross an external border. So they're often like refugees within their own borders, but they suffer similar hardships, and often they're only displaced for a very short amount of time, but often sometimes years. So a good example is what has happened in Syria over the last 10 years. There's a massive amount of IDPs in Syria at the moment. I think when I was quickly looking up the stat, in 2014, there was like 6 million people displaced within Syria, which is an enormous amount of people. So while we often hear about the plight of refugees, the plight of this subgroup of migrants was not as familiar for me. So that was immediately when I got onto this project. This is exactly what I try to concentrate on within the data. So my approach was actually, before I even started playing around in Tableau at all, I actually, you can see on the screen here by my very poorly scrawled out notation, that I actually started trying to generate some ideas through the process of mind mapping. So this is actually something I've been kind of doing a lot more recently when it comes to generating ideas or themes for data visualization. Essentially what you do is, hopefully you can read that. I don't know how big it is on your screens, but essentially what you do is you start with a central concept and essentially link it to other concepts, whatever comes out of your head. So this is the one, I did, started off with the Viz For Social Good migration theme, as you can see at the top. And you might not be able to see it there, but on the mind map, that I started highlighting things like internal displacement, involuntary climate change, economic costs, a nexus between migration and climate change. And by doing this, I was able to quickly form a thematic concept. I wanted to look at the data around numbers of internally displaced people over time, but examine how many of them resulted from weather or climate related disasters. And then what I wanted to do then was communicate to the readers the real existence of a migration climate nexus. And I quickly decided on using a scrolly telling kind of way of presenting, which you'll see in the Viz when I show you in a second. And I really wanted to center it around the 3 chapters. So it's kind of like a book. So I want a chapter on what was the weather as a catalyst for displacement. And then I wanted to look at the consequences of climate change or migration. And also, where possible, try to put a cost, like how much cost was it? Not only in terms of just economic dollars, etc., but also the kind of the other externalities, like, you know, loss, not being able to go to school, not having access to healthcare, all those other costs that maybe you don't see when you don't see every day, the kind of unknown costs of displacement. So some of this was actually inspired by a visualization I saw last year by a guy called Hesham Isa, who did, he won, I think, Iron Viz last year, but he did another one earlier in 2019 on the global journey of refugees, which is kind of very similar to this kind of topic, which really was quite inspirational. So the next step after I did the mind, I tended to do very, very terrible rough sketches of the look and feel. And this is just kind of one page here. And you can see kind of like what I've done is, there's my very poorly drawn map of the world. I was kind of just like kind of thinking out what I might put down, some key stats in those BAN boxes, big ass number boxes that you see around. That's what I call them anyway. So there's geographic data. Obviously I wanted some kind of map to show the locations of the climate related disasters. And then I also wanted some kind of timeline. And then, as I said, some method of calculating costs. So that kind of gives you an idea of the approach. I'm just going to actually jump into Tableau now and kind of give you a rundown of the visualization. Let's hope this works. All right, can you see Tableau?
Yeah, we see Tableau.
Yeah. No worries. So this is in presentation mode. So this is a scrolly telling type visualization, and it kind of goes from top to bottom. And in this Viz, it's kind of, I really wanted to build up the kind of narrative. I actually probably chose visualization that they're not super mind blowing or anything. Like you know, you see some of the visualizations that are going around for, like, for instance, in the recent Iron Quest challenge set by Sarah Bartlett. Some of them are just mind blowingly amazing. I look at those and go, I'm very envious, because I chose very probably simplistic visuals, but I think they still tell the story pretty well. So I started off with a kind of introduction here, using some narrative around internally displaced people, and then a very simple donut chart. For the record, I really actually dislike donut charts and pie charts in most cases, but I did actually give in to temptation and throw one in here. So from the data I gathered, you can see in 2019 that 71% of newly displaced peoples resulted from a climate-related natural disaster. Geophysical events are like earthquakes and volcanoes, and then there's approximately a quarter from conflict. So while we actually hear more about those being displaced by conflict, the vast majority are displaced by things like floods or storms, which is quite interesting, I thought. I've got some numbers down here. IDPs due to weather events in 2019 about 5 million people. So that's quite a substantial amount of people just having to flee their homes because of terrible flooding or a storm or something. So going through the Viz, this is kind of the first chapter here, the catalyst. So what I was trying to do, I actually melded some information from the UN displacement data with just kind of a timeline of information on just like large weather events. So you can see here, we got these, as I kind of scroll along the visual, we've kind of got this, I found this data set that had natural disasters, tracked natural disasters. And I kind of categorized them by weather. So I've kind of done some highlights here just using, it's actually a dual axis line chart. And where I've kind of pointed out some kind of stories about the weather that were of interest to me and to kind of give some context. So here's a good example, 1931 floods in China. And there's a little bit of a story here, major floods hitting in major cities like Wuhan or Nanjing, crops are being destroyed, etc. And many people being displaced. I don't actually have the numbers of displacements in there in most cases, but what you can see here quickly is the kind of almost linear increase in that weather-related natural disasters causing displacements. So what you tend to see when I look through this data is a lot of displacement of peoples in very low-lying areas like Bangladesh. Bangladesh seems to get hammered by weather events. It's like essentially on a floodplain. So when there's floods or storms there, many people have to end up fleeing their homes. And so I've kind of, and what you'll also see is it happens all over the world. So as you can see here from the circles, the circles that, or the trend is essentially up until 2000, we see this massive increase in weather-related events causing displacement. And now it's kind of averaging over 300 per year. And it just doesn't affect the developing world. Yeah, you also get places that Hurricane Katrina in the US displaced over 1 million people. So that kind of was the I guess what I call a catalyst here, kind of showing that climate-related natural disasters are definitely increasing, and with that comes the risk of people having to flee their homes. So down below, you can see here just a simple bar chart to kind of categorize what kind of weather events cause displacement. By far, the most common is flooding, nearly 50%. That's since 2000. And the next chapter of the Viz is kind of the consequence. So this is kind of talking about, rather than just the mapping the number of weather-related events, storms and floods whatsoever, it's kind of like looking at the total amount of people being displaced. So I'm measuring between 2008 2019, which is what the data provided to me by Kieran and Viz For Social Good was. And you can see here, actually, it's India and China lead the rankings, I guess, of displaced peoples. It also, obviously, India and China have a lot of people in their country. So when I look at this Viz, it might have been good of me to kind of look at displacements per capita or something like that to kind of maybe get an idea of how proportionally it affects a country. But you tend to see it obviously in that Southeast Asia, North Asia region, a lot happening in Africa due to weather-related events, and also South America, and also in the US. One of the biggest ones is fairly recent. If you remember the Typhoon Haiyan a couple of years back, 2013, that mega storm that hit the Philippines. The Philippines does tend to get hit with a lot of climate-related natural disasters, and of course it causes a lot of displacement. I don't think you see it on this Viz, but obviously the data set went up a bit further. Actually, no, you got it there. Australia's had, it wasn't saved from that over 100,000. A lot of that would have been, like obviously the bushfires that we just went through would have caused a lot of displacement. So I still got a bit of time, hopefully, Frederic? Just on the last bit anyway.
Yeah, a couple of minutes.
No worries. So the third part of this Viz is kind of trying to estimate the cost. So it's the third chapter. Now, again, I've kind of used visuals here that I'm not super fond usually of the, I can't remember what they call it, the packed bubbles. But what I was trying to communicate here was looking at the estimated costs of displacement for people in select countries measured in US dollars in 2019 alone. And you can see here that these aren't non-trivial costs. We see China had to upward of 24.6 million in weather costs to just IDPs, so people fleeing. So that's the cost inflicted on the people fleeing. That's not, it probably includes costs to the country as well. But you can see it really impacts some of these countries quite significantly, particularly in the developing world and particularly in South Asia. What I wanted to kind of talk about at the end here was that in many ways, dollars, as I say here, dollars can't measure all the costs of displacement, because actually many of the people displaced by weather-related climate change or disasters are under the age of 18. So my research indicated up to about, in any given year, up to 10 million children miss out on access to healthcare and education due to displacement. And because 20% of the IDPs in 2019 were under 18, that's a significant proportion who have to go without school or adequate health services. So the costs aren't always in, you know, plain dollar figures when you know, a huge flood impacts, say, Bangladesh. There's very real human costs as well. So essentially, that was my visualization. I'll kind of run you through it there. But if I could sum up, what I learned from this process was, like, I wasn't exactly, like, I know climate change, like floods and weather-related disasters happen all the time, but what it really drove home, just through the process of looking through the data, joining bits and pieces of information together to form a story, I really kind of dramatically increased my understanding of the plight of people forced to flee their homes due to climate change. So in many ways, like, yes, climate change affects people all over the world in different ways. We're very lucky in Australia in many ways that we're not essentially on a floodplain. And I know we get cyclones, et cetera, but at least generally we have access to pretty good healthcare, pretty good education system. But when these things impact people in other places, they may not have the same advantage. So essentially, it was a very humbling experience doing this viz. So I might just leave it there. If I'm more than happy to take any questions about the process or even aspects of the design.
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes, maybe a minute for questions. So maybe a virtual clap for you, Darragh. I think that's amazing design. I really love the colors and also the storytelling. And also I'm biased with Viz For Social Good. So if you guys, ladies, have been inspired, you can contact us and be part of the next project. So if you're a data person and you want to practice and use your time for charity, contact us, because we're looking for volunteers to run that kind of stuff. And also, if you know charities in Australia or in Brisbane that could be a candidate, like a Kieran type of charity, I'm more than happy to talk to those guys. So any questions for Darragh?
Fred, it's Dave Keys here. I'm a little bit late because I've just been finishing the server admin course. Darragh, I thought that was great. I think the way you've presented it's fantastic, and it's got a really good story with it. The visual appeal of it I thought was really good. And normally I'd be saying too much text, but I think the way you ran the story with it was really good.
Thanks very much, Dave. Yeah, I agree. It is very text heavy, but yeah, I've kind of, this is probably my first kind of big scrolly telling type data visualization I've done. And I did learn a lot out of it, but yeah, backing off the text a bit might be a good one to do in the future.
Any more questions?
I do have a quick question. I'm not sure that they'll be able to answer that, but were you able to detect in the data some of the cross-related, I guess, displacements? For example, the in Syria, there was a massive drought that then led to massive conflicts within the country. And were you able to discern some of this, I guess, in the data sets, and is that something you'd be maybe exploring a little bit further in terms of how these two can be linked together?
Yeah, well, the data set, like, I think it's a valid kind of, there's a causal link, obviously, between, you can draw causal links between these things. Fortunately, the data set doesn't really have that. It was essentially the data set that we were given was maybe like 4 or 5 columns, only tracking like essentially 3 variables. So they didn't go down to that level of granularity of looking at, say, like climate change times conflict or something like that to get a number of people displaced. So I think I would be fascinating though if they had that.
Yeah, I was expecting that, but yeah, that'd be interesting indeed.
Yeah, if anyone wants to do a PhD in that would be awesome.
Well, talk to the Griffith people. Talking about Griffith and research, we can move on to our next presenter. If you're still here, Mark.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Darragh.
Thanks, Darragh.
So, Mark, you got the floor, so you can share your story with the Tableau data stories with Griffith University.
Sure thing. I will just share my wonderful background.
Yeah, we see it now. Oh, I'm muting myself.
Excellent. Cool. So same flow. I've got a little presentation which I'll go through, and then we do have some dashboards to demonstrate as well. So hopefully you can look at my PowerPoint now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Cool. So yeah, what we're trying to do at Griffith really is making complex stuff really simple, and simpler the more we progress into a Tableau journey. Not just thanks to Tableau, of course, but thanks to having a super great data team. And I do know a few of them have joined me today. Hi team, and a couple of others from Griffith as well. So good to see some of my Griffith family coming to hang out with us today. Welcome. So acknowledgement of countries. Frederic did one earlier, but we do one at Griffith. So I stand on Kupuru country. So acknowledge the Kupuru people and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. So what do we think of analytics in the 21st century? So I'll kind of go through this and I'll explain a little bit of background, and then we'll see how we progress. So I've been at Griffith for a couple of years now. We started our Tableau journey not long before I arrived. We have a really fantastic 8-core physical server on premise, leveraging a data warehouse, and a team of about 12 of us who look after that data warehouse and our Tableau server. We also have IBM Cognos as well. So across the journey, we've started some things, we've changed some things, we've looked at the data we ourselves generate through creation of dashboards, we've modified and iterated our content across time, and kind of feels a little bit now that we're really truly starting to understand how to best engage with our users, which is pretty interesting from an analytics team 2 years into their journey. And we've had tools like Cognos for a much longer time than a couple of years. So it's been an interesting journey for us all to watch and learn and grow inside the tool. So what's the things we've learned from a kind of production point of view? So I think the most important for me is knowing your company and knowing your culture. So what fits and what doesn't fit, and what will your company accept and what will they not accept? And you can test and change and iterate. And of course, Tableau Server gives you some really great data, so you can kind of work out what's going on with your users. It's also important to know your users. Personally, ideally, there's about 10,000 staff at Griffith all up in any 12-month period, so we can't possibly know all of them. But we do know everything that they do on the server. So what we strive for, though, is to work out what are the questions that they're asking that we're currently not answering. And lastly, which may be slightly counterintuitive, is to know your stuff. So every organization creates data. Every organization's data model is mildly to moderately to very complex. So knowing the business processes that generate the data, knowing how the data flows around your university, and knowing how you can extract that and make it reflect the reality, that's obviously very important to make sure your analytics is widely used and well trusted. So when I talk about culture, what do I mean? So higher education, for those of us who work in it, is a peculiar beast. It's fantastic, of course. I've been here for 2 years and not looking to leave. But in higher ed, internal promotion is a big thing. So there are only a few workplaces in the world that you can think about where you kind of start at the bottom rung and you work your way up that internal ladder, and jumping ladders is not really a thing that you can do. So you start as a student, you graduate, you go back and do your master's, do your PhD, start in some adjunct research type roles, gradually move on to maybe a full-time teaching research job, move your way up through that ladder until you end up at the VC position within a university. So that's all internal. There's not many industries that do that type. The police is one and the armed forces is the other. So that you have to be mindful that the people who you're dealing with are coming from that long line of tradition and internal promotion. And people really like academic freedom, so they really cherish that. You'll have seen lots of that in the media recently. So they tend to be quite frank in their communications with you, which I personally think is awesome. But it does feed into the culture of higher ed. And research really matters to them. In fact, if you were to ask a standard academic, they would say that research is all that matters, and they also teach. So you have to think about, you're trying to release a dashboard generally about their students. So you have to try and find a wedge to get into their research so that they can take the time to look at the dashboards that you're making. And we have a distributed workforce, both theoretically and actually, and of course working from home now as well. So by that we mean most of our staff, our academic staff, are heavily focused on their research. And so you have to find ways again to engage with them and make time. So you also have to know your users. So what does your standard user look like, and what do they act like? So Tableau makes that easy, and I'll go through some examples very, very soon. So know the what, which is relatively straightforward. So you can find out exactly what they're doing either on your server or in the data source, but strive for the why. So try to understand why certain users are behaving in a particular way and using the dashboards in a way, hopefully, that you intend, but perhaps not. So length of service also matters. At Griffith and generally in higher ed, we would have a longer than average length of service for staff in an institution. So you have to be mindful of where they're coming from in terms of their data literacy. They would tend to have been at Griffith or within higher ed for the majority, if not all, of their career. Not me, I'm just a couple of years in my higher ed journey. And then do you have any existing tools in your environment, other than Excel, of course, or Google Sheets, which we all have? And also understand how the data fabric of your university or your institution works. So how do the people who you're making your information for, how do they consume your data? Is it PDFs in meetings? Is it Excel reports sent periodically, or is it accessing near real-time information directly from a server? So all that adds up. It's not a bad start. For those of you who use Tableau Server, you'll recognize it. It's the default admin view of who's using your stuff. It's not bad. You can certainly get some what out of this, like what's the most common time for content to be consumed. So it will be no surprise that we launch our emails about new content at 11 AM on the server. So this is a bit better. Even better is you can make it manually out of Tableau Server if you're unable to access the database that server lives on, which is Postgres. So this will give you a lot more what, and you can see how many active users we've had, how many hits they're making, and what's the average amount of hits per user. We also extract the BI team out of this because we tend to skew it, and me in particular. So know your stuff and make it easy. Again, we've got a couple of years in the journey, and now we'll go into some demonstrations about where we started and what we've done and where we are today. And for some of my Griffith colleagues, you might not have seen some of the dashboards because they're prototypes. Hopefully we get to release them soon. So this is a starting point. So it's going to be pretty grainy, that's the point. You may not know what it is. It might not be overly intuitive to look at to start with, but it is a retention dashboard. It's on Cognos, and when people call us and ask us questions about it, we have a team huddle, and we give each other cuddles and we tell each other it's going to be okay, and we can understand it if we just work as a team and collaborate. So if experienced and highly qualified analysts are struggling to deal with the information, we can only imagine what a standard user is making of it. So that's where we started in terms of what we've got in IBM Cognos. Doesn't live there anymore, of course. We've removed it and we've replaced it with a couple of other options, which we'll get to soon. So when we launched Tableau, this is how we started. We started with some donut charts with some numbers and some charts. Pretty noisy, pretty noisy. So I'll just get out of that and I will demo where we're at. And hopefully I'm doing okay for time. So we are in server, in our production server, but I will stress, and we'll make it as we go along, this is only for external use. All data is randomized and anonymized, so we're not breaking any confidences or breaching any data rules. So everything you see in here is purely to display functionality. The data is complete nonsense, but it will work in terms of showing you the functionality for dashboards. So some of you might be familiar with the old Sankey, one of my best friends, Mr. Sankey. So we'll start with this one. So Tony, the main developer, is on the call. Thank you, Tony, for this wonderful work. So again, this is randomized and anonymized data, so it's not a reflection on retention at Griffith. But that dashboard I first showed you, this is what it has morphed into. So we pick a cohort. So in universities, we deal with terms. So if you apply to a uni and you start your degree, you commence in a term, and that's how we say that you're starting at Griffith. So we pick the term here, 2016 T1 for this particular case. We can view it by all of the groups, again, all anonymized. We can see how the schools sit under the groups, and we can see how the programs sit under the schools. So there's a hierarchy at play here, so we allow users to navigate their way across. And then you can de-aggregate your way deep into the detail if you so wish. But the key thing is we try to keep things on a single dashboard where we can. And we spend time on trying to make it simple. Retention is not a straightforward concept. It does decrease over time. That's how retention works. So we can see that if you mouse over here, you get a number, a commencing cohort number. Again, the data is randomized. That's not an accurate number. And you can see how many continue at Griffith, so how many are retained over the terms, how many complete the program in which they've commenced, which is the dark green, how many transfer into a different program, which is the blues, and how many leave the program, so they're not retained. So again, this is a term-based view, but you can see there's a lot of inter-term movement. So generally, the first production dashboard we have on this only shows the term-by-term view. This one will allow us to look at the actual migration of students in between terms. And as you can see, there's a reasonable amount of movement, even though this data is randomized and anonymized and nonsense. So hopefully a good little demo to see how we've went from something that was super complex to any standard user at Griffith can interrogate this. They're not overly familiar with Sankey's, but the concept becomes pretty clear within just a few minutes of explanation to any users. So that's the first one. The next one is another retention dashboard. We call it the whiz banger. Nice and colloquial. Again, data is randomized and anonymized. It's not going to make any sense. So this is really where we're at on our analytics journey, is the use of parameterized dimensions to drive de-aggregation into data. Universities are blessed with about 17 bazillion dimensions and about 3 measures. So we have to make the most of the dimensions and enjoy eating the measures when we can. So again, similar deal, pick your commencing cohort, pick your program type, select your terms, exclude or include transfers, standardize the year or view it just in a single academic term, change the type of the x-axis, etc. So we allow lots of flexibility to put in and take out of the view exactly what you need. These wonderful parameters that drive tree maps allow you to dig into the detail. Again, we've got the 17 bazillion dimensions. This is only just a handful. So you can see things like if you click on group, so the data starts to de-aggregate. You can click on a single group and you can compare and contrast that against another group. And you can see quickly what that retention behavior of a particular cohort looks like. So we'll just pick one, again, all randomized and anonymized. And you can dig down if you're familiar with the hierarchies. So element is next. And you can see what that retention looks like within a particular element. And if you just pick one, let's pick nothing, then we can still go further. So let's take gender. So yeah, only females because we've completely randomized it. Disability. Yep. So again, this is where we have arrived at in our journey. This is the type of dashboard that we really favor because we think it's really simple and quick. Single dashboard, single screen, no buttons, no navigating into detail. Everything's presented in a single view for the standard user. This is still a prototype. It's been built for a specific project, and we do hope to release it to our audience very, very soon. And the last one I'll just show is the Terminized dashboard built by Brian. Hayes built this one here. They're both in the call today. So we deal with terms. So we thought, what better name for a dashboard than the Terminator? How original. So again, all randomized. Nothing here is commercial confidence. So this dashboard allows us to compare and contrast between a term. So we've got term 1 selected here. We can choose between them. Term 4 changes the visualization. We can select the term we're going to reference that against. We can pick a single group to display that against. And we use the same parameter-driven, dimension-driven parameters to select the level of aggregation that's going to be meaningful. So we keep it on campus. Now we're looking at campus and campus, but we can pick any of these different parameters. So again, we're trying to make it simple as we can. You see, we're just using a simple bar and bar chart here to display. We've got the color of orange if things are going well, or if it drops below that threshold, it turns silver. So we can make it as simple as possible for our users, again, a standard user to log in, do a term compare and contrast, and work out what is meaningful. So I think that's pretty much me dead on time. Frederic, if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
That's really awesome, Mark. Mark and the team. So if you devs are on the call, clap to everyone. I like teams that cuddle. I guess you don't cuddle anymore because you dropped IBM. So do you still cuddle with Tableau?
Yeah, well, I don't really like social contact even before coronavirus, so virtual high fives are perfect for me.
Okay, let give you some thumb up. So I'm opening the floor to questions. If you good people have a question for the Griffith team.
I just have a comment, Frederic. It's Darragh here again. This looks awesome, Mark. I used to do this kind of work at both UQ and QUT, and QT was pretty good, but it's well ahead of you. What you've got there is well ahead of UQ. So I know there's a bit of local competition, but so take that as a compliment.
Thank you very much. Yes, we consider ourselves colleagues, somewhat, some of the time.
No, well done.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone? Comment? Claps?
Just clap and comment. Keeping it simple is the biggest single thing you can do. You're spot on the money doing that. Within 15 seconds, you really want people to understand what they're looking at.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. And I like the names as well. Like, are they real names? Like, are you calling the dashboard Terminator? And this is the name that you come up with in terms of your comms plan? Is it the kind of name you give to those dashboards for fun, but people
pretty much. So we're kind of, we start with a colloquial term because that's what you just call it in-house, and then it kind of sticks. So we've got the Terminator, we've got the Whiz Banger, we've got the Sankey, and we've got a new dashboard that looks at all of our applicant data through the various stages to matriculation. So we call that the Big Kahuna. And those, they just start to stick. It's technically called applicant to student journey, but I prefer the Big Kahuna. So when people ask me about it, they ask me about the Big Kahuna. So yeah, I think it's, we try and kind of take the seriousness out of it. Like, it's just a dashboard. It's just data. You will be able to understand it. It's a Big Kahuna, like a burger. Enjoy it.
Right. Any more questions? Anyone?
I just want to, Adam, I just want to congratulate on the Viz and virtual chairs rather than high five. But yeah, quick, almost like a rhetorical question, because I assume it's been great, but what's been the adoption like in terms of on the academic side of things, which I know is sometimes a bit challenging to convert, I guess. I assume it's been great, but yeah, just want to hear it from you.
Yeah, so one of our colleagues, Vince, who's known as a legend in Griffith, so he looks after the majority of our research data. So the single biggest hit Tableau server ever got was when Vince launched his academic performance tool, 1,700 users in a single day. Because it's all tied to promotions in research, your academic performance. So they're heavily invested in that data and in that dashboard. Comes around annually and is in fact coming up pretty soon. So we'll expect to see server getting lots of activity again in that space.
Well done. And what is there any particular technique that you found more effective than others to raise awareness and like whether it's internal user groups or just email blast or I'm just curious to see if you had.
Yeah, probably. COVID has didn't help us at the start. Productivity dropped massively at the start, but we kind of once we found our feet, let's say 6 to 8 weeks to kind of find our feet, all working from home, and that wasn't really a thing we did before coronavirus. So we started doing Teams live events, so people could join anonymously, ask questions anonymously, ask any question, and we found that thing has really driven adoption and usability. We found that if we made it non-anonymous, we got lower attendance. So we think that, again, it's that culture thing. In higher ed, you get a PhD, which means you're an expert. You're an individual expert, so you can never be wrong. So providing an anonymous space for people to ask questions, that really was the thing that really drove adoption for us. So the Teams live events have been great.
Thank you. Awesome. That's fascinating. Actually, I wasn't expecting that answer. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. No,
and yeah, pretty impressive dashboards.
I just stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, I think I've killed you.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
thanks, Mark, and the team. Yeah.
Yep, terminated chatbot.
So next we've got President Ronak from QT. So Ronak is the president of one of the student societies at QT, and then recently organized a Tableau datathon. So Adam from Kidara was delivering the training. I was part of the judging panel. So keep in mind that those students were brand new IT students that have never used Tableau before, and they had an internal competition. So I think I really love the vibe and the energy of students. So I thought it would be an interesting story to tell you guys. So Ronak, you got the floor, and then you can tell us about your experience with Tableau and then your Tableau datathon.
Sure, Frederic. Thanks a lot. So I'll be sharing my screen now.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Perfect. All good. Yep. So as Frederic mentioned, so we are a student-led society at QUT, having around 300 members and still counting. And we are just two years old now. So we are doing great in this space. And so I would like to start with what QUT Bands is. So we are business analysts and data science society at QUT. So our main work is like our students have all the academic knowledge they are gaining through QUT, attending all the lectures and all. But what we found was like there was a gap between industries and the academics. So our students were not able to get that exposure, that what you call real world exposure. So that's how QUT Bands was formed. So as you can see through this pictorial, so QUT Bands is in the middle, bridging the gap between industries and students. So how do we achieve this? We organize series of events throughout the semester, including the panel discussions, some industry catch-ups, and hackathons, datathons, and speed networking events. So one such event was the Tableau workshop. It was delivered by Adam and his team from Kidata. I'm really thankful to Adam and his team for taking time and delivered 2 workshops. So the first workshop was pretty much the basics of Tableau, just to give them the overview of how Tableau works and all. And the second workshop was a bit of advanced features of Tableau. So in these workshops, around 30 participants participated in both the workshops. As you can see here in the graph, So out of 13, 19 were the beginners. They were not aware about what Tableau is. And 7 of them were, you can call them intermediate ones, and 4 of them were professionals who had some prior experience working on Tableau. So through these workshops, what we achieved was these 19 beginners like who have joined Tableau, we welcome them to the Tableau community now. And within the span of 1 week, they have developed amazing dashboards. So how we conducted these events is like we had 2 workshops within a gap of 1 day. And after these workshops, we have given 4 days to our students so they can work on that some real world problems. So we have released the problem statement on the first day of the workshop, so they can align themselves according to the problem statement and can get help from the mentors present there. So problem statement was released on the first day. 6 teams participated in the hackathon. So totally 4 days of time was given to them. On the final hackathon pitch day, which was held on the Monday after 4 days, each team was given 4 minutes for the presentation, and our experts were present on the final day of the hackathon. So we had Frederic, Adam from Key Data, Adam from QT Center of Data Science, and Dr. Ashish, who joined us virtually and reviewed the work of all our students. So it was great to see, having 2 workshops in the beginning and then giving them 4 days of time so that they can get the exposure to work on real world problem statements. And I would like to thank all our judges and our mentors, Frederic and Adam, who were available on Slack channels to help them out to proceed with their problem statements. And at the end of the day, when you see 6 amazing dashboards presented, so it feels great that we did something for the community and it came out really well. So I really appreciate the efforts of all our students and all our mentors who helped us on this way. So that's it from my end. So today along with me, I was joined by the winning team. So Chintan, my friend, is present here, who will be taking you guys through his dashboard, what he has worked on during the hackathon time. So over to you, Chintan. Can you please share your screen and show the dashboard?
Yeah, thank you, Ronak.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. As told by Ronak, that I'll be presenting the dashboard that was prepared by our team. And basically, this dashboard, the data was already given to us, where the data was given to us regarding the various details that would be required to understand for any student when he is migrating to Brisbane city. So the data that was given to us was with respect to the rental data. So it includes that what is the rent of 1 room, 2 room, 3 room flats, house, townhouse, and other component. Along with this, the accessibility data was given to you, as you can see. So it was with respect to the cycles and the other modes of transport that were available. And lastly, some of the other essential things regarding the convenience were available to us. So what we have tried here is just a small attempt. So the purpose of this dashboard is for any new student to understand the basics, that if they are looking for a new house, so they can use this particular dashboard and get the easy solution for them. Moving on to the first slide that you can see here. So what we are presenting here is the rental data. We try to make it self-explainable. So in this, this is the entire map data that you can see here in Brisbane, where the darker the color indicates the amount of rent that is available is high. So as a student, usually there are some amount of budget constraints. So we have added a budget limit at this particular stage that you can see. And as you change the budget, the color changes accordingly. So within this particular budget, the darker the color, that means the rent is high, and accordingly. The same can be looked for, let's say 1 room, 2 room, or even the flat and rental house that can be available for any of the zone. So for example, here you can see that in this particular budget, that means from $225 to $286, none of the houses are available. So that's why it's showing the null value. One another thing that we have added is, let's say if a suburb is already known to a student, so he can directly go into that particular suburb and look for the rent in that particular suburb. So that particular aspect was also added. And let's say if you just want to hover over the entire map and look at, okay, what is the average rent? And apart from the rent, we have also added one additional component, that is the accessibility from that particular zone. So he can even look into the multiple suburbs that are available and then compare the rents and the facilities accordingly. So the primary aim that we have added the first slide is because rent is the first and foremost the priority component for any particular student. The next thing that we have added is the new bonds, which indicates that, okay, so we have the new bond data from the last 3 years from 2018 to 2020. So what we have done is we have added all the data on a single scale. The main purpose of this was to show that what is the trend of the bond in each of the suburb. So you can see here that, like, for example, for this particular suburb in 2018 it was high, it reduced a bit in 19, and in 2020 it's growing very well. So the same thing can be looked also for the different categories, let's say flat for 1 room, 2 room, and so on. One another thing that we added is, let's say someone wants to stay in a good suburb. So if he decides that, okay, I want to live in the top 10 suburbs of the Brisbane city, so he can just set a range here. So in this case, he will get the top 10 suburbs that we have in the Brisbane city. So now you can observe that the rental data for the first 3 suburbs, then for the next 3 suburbs, and so on, they are uniform. The reason is the data that was provided to us for the rental data was based on the postcode, and based on the another lookup table, we arranged that postcode with the various suburbs. So as the rental data was available with respect to postcode, few of the suburbs will have the same amount of rent, and that's the reason that you can look into this particular kind of visualization. So these two are the topmost priority component that you have. And the third thing that the student would usually look into is the accessibility. So in this particular map, in the background, what you can see are the various colors, which indicates the total accessibility. So in the total accessibility, what we have considered is the ferries, the cycles, and the buses. So in our data, the cycle stops were given to us, and I don't remember about the ferries, but yeah, cycle stops were given to us. But what we have done is we have added the bus data because, let's say in case of Brisbane, the topmost priority or the mode of transport is the buses. So all the, as you can see that for the Brisbane CBD area, you can see that there are 140. So it doesn't mean the buses, they are the total number of bus stops. So what we are assuming here is the larger number of bus stops, the more amount of accessibility that you have. So this is how the overall accessibility data was provided to you. So what you can do is by filtering or considering a particular budget, you can decide your budget, and based on accordingly to your budget, the various modes will be filtered, all the suburbs will be filtered, and then you can look into the transport accessibility accordingly. So we are providing 3 main way of decision. First is the rent, second is the popularity of the zone, and third is the accessibility. So these are the 3 topmost priority components that we have included. The last component is the other amenities, as you can see here, which indicates the total number of parks that are available as well as the Wi-Fi count. So we try, as they are not so important to the other components, so we try to bring it into a single scale, where the scale on the y-axis indicates the total number of parks that are available, and the size of this dot are depending on the number of public Wi-Fi that are available. So let's say for this particular data, although the number of parks are more, the Wi-Fi is less. So if someone wants to stay in a balanced area with average number of parks and a good Wi-Fi, so let's say these are the suburbs that are more preferable to them. So based on the data that were available to us and something that we could, additional data that we could fetch from the Google, this was the overall dashboard that our team tried to prepare. So that's the thing that we have done.
Thanks a lot, Chintan, for the great showcase. So I think the
Thank
team.
you. Right on time.
Yeah. I think one more thing to mention here, Frederic. So we are planning now to have another hackathon. We are yet to finalize things. So this time we'll be partnering with UQ. So there's one student club at UQ and QET. So it would be great fun, having those 2 universities on board and give them a problem statement and take the hackathon forward. So
did I hear that well, Ronak?
sorry.
Really?
Yeah.
Did I hear that well? Really? That's
Can you bring Griffith as well? So who's running the training? Is it Kijara, or you're running the training yourself? Same model?
So we are still finalizing the things. So once we are done with the proposal, everything, we'll get back to you guys and we'll design the whole hackathon.
Cool. Yeah. We can, if we can help. I'm just a big clap for Chintan and Ronak's team. I think those guys were, as you could see, most of them were beginners.
Yeah.
And it was really awesome to show what they could come up with. So I guess if anyone in the call is looking for data analyst, junior data analyst, you've got a bunch of students that would be willing to get a first job as Tableau developers. We're almost done, so I'd like to maybe open the floor for general questions. I'm also be looking for volunteers to present at the next TAG Tableau user group, maybe in a couple of months' time. So not pointing fingers, but if someone is willing to present, put a hand. I know I've already recruited Gary from GLL, who will be talking next because he was the first one to join. So maybe I'm going to look at the last one who joined the Zoom chat, and that last one will be the volunteer to present next time. So I know Fred from Sydney just came in, young as well. And you're here. Hi, guys. Good to see you around. But I can open the floor for your questions. Put your video on and your microphone and have a chat. There's no beer, no pizza, but we can have a chat for 5 minutes before we close the event. So I'm opening the floor for general feedback, comments, chats. Let me know. Who wants to talk?
Fred, it's Dave Keys. I'd just emulate what Adam said earlier. Thank you very much for taking the lead on this. We've been doing this since, I think it's 2014. And Tableau actually like to have the society and not Tableau partners or employees running these things. So it's really great to have you on board doing this stuff. Really appreciate it.
It's good fun. Bring the community together. So it's always fun. So no more questions. So what we can do is maybe have our videos turned on, and I'll have we can take a photo, take a selfie, and put that on social. So turn your video on, your cameras, and then go crazy.
Yeah,
Adam,
just want to. No, just on behalf of Penny, who's added the comment in the chat. I think that's a great idea. She was basically saying Ronak and Chinton are unis. So Penny from Griffith, I assume. Our unis should totally provide an app that provides that info to our students, aka that info about the real estate side of things. And you could also sell that to realestate.com. Nice job. So yeah, thanks for your comment, Penny. That's actually something we were, yeah, I think so. We were trying to aim at basically giving the students a data set that made sense. That's one of the things that we promote, or I guess David Keys has been promoting all around, is if you're trying to learn Tableau or visualization skills, find a topic that you're interested in, and you'll find yourself working on it at night and probably over the weekend as well, because you've got a passion for it, instead of trying to get a boring data set and trying to make beautiful features. So that's what we try and find with this data set is, okay, something that those guys could actually use, whether they're international student or local student as well. So yeah, totally concur.
Yeah.
So don't be shy. Turn your videos on, please, people. Everyone, hey, how young are you? I've been meeting to meet younger. We've been sort of Tableau friends for a couple of years or more, and always sort of chatting on social stuff, on public, and never really met in person. So that's amazing. Thanks, John, for coming.
Hey, Fred. Thanks for inviting.
That's all right. So who wants to talk
There's
next time?
So many familiar faces. That's awesome.
Yeah. So do I get a volunteer for next time? A lady, maybe. Camilla. What do you work, Camilla?
Well, I work in a company that welcomes refugees here in Australia. So it was really interesting to get connected with the first presentation.
Oh, right. So volunteer, Viz For Social Good, we can talk later if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I work with Power BI, but I'm really interested to learn more about Tableau as well.
We're not racist. That's okay.
It's a good platform.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hey, Bruce, didn't see you there. Looks like your head is chopped. I'm going to take a photo. Big wave. Cool. All right. If there's no more questions, nobody questions. Comment. Yeah.
So, when's the next talk again?
I guess it's up to us, or maybe up to me to decide. As you know, there's a Tableau conference early October, a free conference online.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be a lot of traffic and activity, and people will be busy. So maybe early November-ish. I'm not too sure. So I guess it depends if I can find people that can present.
Okay.
It's really up to us to decide, really. if someone wants to organize a talk or present or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you have in mind? Do you have something in mind, Young?
I was maybe thinking, but yeah, it's really it's a bit tricky for me because my PhD thesis is due in December.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a crunch time. So I thought like if the talk was maybe sometime next year in January, then
so we usually run these every quarter.
Every quarter.
And that's not set in stone. I mean, the last one was February. So now that we've got the mechanism and the help with Frederic to be able to run this virtually, it's actually quite seamless. So we'll try and do this every 2 or 3 months. So please reach out to Frederic and or myself with whatever topic and with your ideal timeline, and then we can just basically keep you at the back of our mind for the next Tableau user group.
And for people that don't know Young is a PhD student from UQ. So he's in the scientific space and he's very active in Tableau Public and always posting very interesting scientific dashboards, which it's all about science.
Awesome.
You maybe can tell us for 10 seconds, Young, because I never understand what you mean, but it's always beautiful.
So it really has to do with the field of my research, which is microbiology. So just to kind of short, my PhD research focuses on looking at the different species of bacteria that are found in various environments. But the ones that I work is usually from industrial environments. So things like the Alberta oil sands and alcohol fermentation facilities. And what I'm trying to do is to try to look at what these bacteria do in their environment, and also to look at whether those sort of functions exist in other species of bacteria. So really, and I like my other research interests, I guess my interest outside of the research is actually doing the scientific communication, where I actually try to give some sort of public awareness about what these microbes do in their environment. So yeah, that's roughly where my sort of dashboard sit in.
And I love you to show us your dashboard because they're really amazing. So maybe next time, if time works, I think that you're on my list. You've been on my list for a long time. So
yeah,
cool.
And I just want to emphasize again, like for everyone to be a bit reassured on no pressure, I guess, type of thing. We've had today was a pretty good example of, for example, Mark and the Griffith team presenting some stuff that are pretty out there in terms of visualization. And even though they look simple, they're actually a little bit complex to make happen. But also the visualization from Darragh was more about the insights, and the visualization was extremely simple. So, it doesn't have to be something that's super advanced, and there's absolutely no shame to present whatever skills you've got and whatever experience you have. There should be really absolutely no shame, and there's definitely someone in the crowd who's going to learn something from what you're presenting. So the more presenters, the better.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. So I'd like to maybe close formally the event. Thanks, everyone, for joining online first virtual talk. In Brisbane, there's a lot of talks all around the world. If you're interested, if you go on the on Twitter, LinkedIn, there's talks everywhere in the world. So I think that's pretty amazing. If you got time, you can join those virtual events and learn and make friends. As we all know, Tableau community is great. And ping me online if you have questions, if you want to present, and if you have comments. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to you. Shout out to you, Fred.
See you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Good to meet.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.